Good morning, everyone. From today, we are going to start to understand how to model in 3D, starting from a simple object to complex architectures, such as a building, or in the specific case of the Erasmus Plus project, digitizing architectural restoration education through virtual reality. We are going to reconstruct a typical coastal tower located in the Salento area in southern Italy. Before we do that, however, I would like to introduce a little bit to the 3D modeling software, Blender, specifically using version 3.3.0, but an earlier version may be fine. Let's start by briefly introducing the architecture of the software. In particular, we are now acting on a window called the layout, which is the 3D scene. Inside it we see three objects, a cube with a light and a camera. As we will see later, there are different types of light and camera. The cube in question is a solid placed centrally at the origin of the Cartesian axis, the x, y and z axis, as we can also see from the symbols arranged in the upper right hand corner. Also from here we can move the view by clicking and holding this selection, or by clicking directly the color dots, we can arrange in the perpendicular side, top and bottom views. The cube is the object that by default Blender places in the scene. When we open the software, as we will be able to see in the following video lessons, is the simplest object from which most of the elements will be originated. Having said that, before we get into the editing tools, let's conclude our discussion of Blender's scene structure. In the layout window, we notice at the top that there are different scenes that can be opened. In particular, we have the modeling window, which provides us with all the editing model tools that we will see later. Sculpting, on the other hand, allows me to edit the object through literal sculpting tools. The UV editing, which is used for the texturing face of the cube through an opening of the faces of the object, facilitating the texture assignment for each individual face. Then we have the texture paint window, another method that it's used for texturing based on an already present texture that can be colored manually, like with a pencil. Then the shading layout allows me to have a general idea about the specific use of nodes for assigning materials and textures. The animation window, instead, manages the animation of the object by means of keyframes through a timeline. The rendering window for the final export visualization of the 3D scene, and so on. There are windows related to specific software managements. Mainly, we will work in the basic layout, but also in modeling and UV editing through other windows. As you see, the slider in the top left corner that turns into a plus, allowing me to simultaneously open multiple windows in a single layout. As in this case, we can choose to have the UV editor along with the main layout, or an image editor, and so on. To delete such a window, just click from the right to left once the cursor becomes a white arrow. At the bottom, however, by default we have the timeline for the animation, which we can change according to our needs. Usually for convenience we will use the shader editor. On the right we have the hierarchy section with collection that allows me to collect and sort the different elements in the If we want to add a new collection, we right-click New Collection. We can then group objects belonging to a different thematic core For example, if we have to build a house, we want to sort the object by rooms, so we can rename the collection with room 1, room 2, etc., inside of which we can insert a table, and we can drag it inside room 1. This kind of organization also allows us to hide from the scene the elements we want, even an entire collection, by simply clicking the eye symbol. The camera symbol, on the other hand, if we deselect it, tells us that in rendering, what we have deselected will not be displayed, but despite this, we can still display it in the scene while we work. With Ctrl Z, we can go back to the action we did previously. In this section, called Transform, instead, we display the parameters of the selected object based on the three axes, such as its location, rotation, scale, and dimension, and we can change them directly from here. Let's take a few examples. Blender sets the scene within a grid that we can decide whether or not to display by clicking this button with the two circles at the top. We can then decide the width of the panel or even decide to hide it with the N shortcut.